Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. Ethan Moore sat in the cockpit of his aging spacecraft, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. His hands rested limply on the controls, eyes bloodshot and hollow from years of ceaseless exploration. He was no longer the wide-eyed rookie who had left Earth full of ambition. Now, he was just another tired explorer, drifting from one mission to the next, each new discovery adding nothing to the gaping void inside him. He had seen it holoplanets teeming with alien life, vast nebulae glowing in shades of violet and crimson, desolate moons that echoed only with the memories of civilizations long gone. But nothing filled that hollow space within him. The universe felt too vast, too uncaring, and the more he explored, the less he felt connected to anything, including himself. The blinking light on the dashboard indicated he had arrived at his destination. Phloresis, the name had popped up in mission briefs only recently. Uncharted, located on the far edge of human space, and emitting an energy signature unlike anything previously recorded. There were rumors, of course there always were. Some said the planet had healing properties, that its flora could cure even the deepest emotional wounds. Others dismissed it as just another strange, unexplored rock among billions. Ethan didn't care either way. This was supposed to be his last mission before retirement, a final assignment to tick off the list. He hoped to find peace in solitude, nothing more. As he descended through the planet's atmosphere, his sensors lit up with readings unlike any he'd seen before. Phloresis was alive, pulsing with energy. The vast jungles stretched out below him, a sea of green interspersed with brilliant flashes of color flora that glowed with an inner light, as if they were aware of his arrival. The ship touched down with a gentle thud. Ethan powered down the engines, took a deep breath, and stepped out. The air was thick with a heady fragrance of something floral, but also familiar in a way he couldn't quite place. He inhaled deeply, feeling the tension in his muscles begin to ease. The ground beneath his boots was soft, covered with a vibrant moss that seemed to shift colors as he walked across it, responding to his presence. He wandered through the jungle, setting up temporary sensors to record data, but his mind wasn't on the mission. He found himself stopping frequently, breathing in the unfamiliar scents, marveling at the way the plants seemed to glow in time with his heartbeat. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but the longer he stayed, the more he felt a connection between himself and the planet, as if Phloresis were aware of him, adjusting itself to suit his needs. By the time he reached a small clearing, he realized how much lighter he felt. The weight of the years seemed to slip off his shoulders. The ever-present ache in his knees, a reminder of an old injury, had lessened. He stared at the surrounding flora, their soft glow filling the air with hues of lavender and blue. The plants swayed gently, though there was no wind. The day passed without incident. Ethan gathered samples, recorded the planet's energy emissions, and returned to the ship for the night. But sleep eluded him. His mind raced with thoughts of the past, of the lives he had touched and left behind, of the mistakes he had made. The memories came unbidden, yet instead of the usual sharp pain that accompanied them, there was only a dull ache, as if the planet itself were softening the edges of his sorrow. The next morning, he set out to explore further. He followed the path deeper into the jungle, where the plants became more varied, more vibrant. The fragrances grew stronger, changing with each step, and Ethan found his mind clearing. The fog of fatigue lifted, and he felt as strange, but whole. There was no other way to describe it. Several hours in, he came across a massive tree, its roots curling like tendrils across the forest floor. Its bark glowed faintly, a deep, rhythmic pulse of light that seemed to emanate from within. Ethan stared, transfixed. He couldn't explain why, but he knew this was the heart of Phloresis. Everything about the planet revolved around this tree. Without thinking, he set up camp nearby. He would spend the next few days observing it, studying its properties. As he sat down to rest, a wave of exhaustion washed over him, and not the physical kind, but emotional. It had been years since he had allowed himself to feel anything deeply, but now, in the presence of this strange, sentient flora, his defenses crumbled. That night, the dreams began. They were not like any dreams he had experienced before. They were vivid, crystal clear, almost as if he were reliving his own past. In the first dream, he was a young man again, standing in front of the spaceport on Earth, preparing to say goodbye to his family before his first mission. His father's proud smile, his mother's tear-filled eyes, they were more real than any memory. And yet, there was something else, a presence, watching over the scene, guiding it. He awoke with a start, his heart pounding. The air around him was thick with a scent of jasmine, calming and familiar. He took deep breaths, his pulse slowing as the plants around him responded to his fear, releasing waves of soothing light. The following days were the same. Each night, he relived a moment from his past, moments that had been buried deep, hidden beneath layers of guilt and regret. But there was no pain, only release. Each memory came with a sense of closure, as if the planet itself were helping him process and heal. Ethan's body grew stronger, too. The aches and pains that had plagued him for years began to fade. His mind, once clouded with fatigue, felt sharper than it had in decades. He no longer needed to record notes or observations. Everything about the planet, every subtle shift in the light, every fragrance that filled the air, was imprinted in his memory with perfect clarity. It was as if Phloresis was not just healing him, it was changing him. On the sixth day, Ethan stood before the great tree again, feeling its energy pulse through the air. He reached out, placing his hand on the bark. The moment his skin touched the surface, a vision overwhelmed him. He saw Phloresis as it had been thousands of years ago, a sanctuary for an ancient race of beings. They had lived in harmony with the planet, using its energy to heal their minds and bodies. The flora had evolved alongside them, developing the ability to sense emotions, to soothe and calm the weary. But over time, the race had disappeared, leaving only the planet behind, waiting for others to find it. Ethan pulled his hand back, his mind spinning. He understood now. Phloresis wasn't just a planet, it was a living entity, a consciousness that had survived for millennia, waiting for someone like him. It was more than a place of healing, it was a source of knowledge, of wisdom beyond anything humanity had ever known. Days turned into weeks. Ethan stopped caring about his mission reports. He no longer communicated with the outside world, choosing instead to stay near the great tree, absorbing its energy, its knowledge. The visions became more frequent, not just of the past but of the future. He saw glimpses of other worlds, other civilizations. He saw the vastness of the universe in ways he had never imagined. The more he learned, the more he realized how small and insignificant humanity truly was in the grand scheme of things. And yet, he also understood that Phloresis had chosen him for a reason. It had given him this gift of wisdom, not to keep it for himself, but to share it. But then, the final vision came. Ethan saw the planet from above, watched as ships descended from the stars. They were human ships, but not like his own. They were warships, bristling with weapons, designed for conquest. He saw soldiers, not explorers, setting foot on Phloresis, tearing up the plants, cutting down the trees, draining the planet of its energy. They wanted to harness Phloresis for their own purposes, to turn its healing power into a weapon. Ethan's eyes snapped open, his body covered in a cold sweat. The vision had felt too real, too immediate. He stood in the stillness of the jungle, heart pounding, trying to calm the storm of thoughts racing through his mind. The planet, which had been his sanctuary, was now in danger. He could feel it in the air, an underlying tension that hadn't been there before. Phloresis knew too. The trees, the plants, everything around him seemed to hum with a nervous energy, as if the planet was aware of its own looming threat. He stumbled back toward the ancient tree, his breathing heavy. How long did he have? Days? Weeks? There was no way to know for sure, but the message from the vision was clear. Humans would come, and when they did, they would destroy everything in their path. They would tear apart this sacred place, reduce it to something they could exploit, control. They wouldn't understand the delicate balance, the healing that Phloresis offered. They would see only the potential for power. Ethan's first instinct was to flee, to get off the planet and report back, warn the authorities about the impending invasion. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that doing so would only make things worse. If he told them what Phloresis truly was, they would send even more ships, more soldiers. The greedy, power-hungry factions in the galaxy would scramble to claim the planet for themselves. He couldn't let that happen. Phloresis was too precious, too unique to be destroyed by human hands. The planet had healed him, given him wisdom, and now it was his responsibility to protect it. But how? He was only one man, alone on an entire planet. How could he stop the inevitable? The answer came to him as he stood beneath the great tree. He didn't need to fight. Phloresis had survived for thousands of years without weapons, without armies. It had survived through its connection to those who came here in need. And now, it had connected with him. It had given him the wisdom he needed to understand the planet, to feel its energy coursing through him. He wasn't alone. He had Phloresis itself. The tree's glow pulsed softly, and Ethan felt its calming presence settle over him. He closed his eyes, letting the connection between himself and the planet strengthen. The visions came again, but this time, they weren't of destruction. They were of possibility. He saw himself staying on Phloresis, becoming part of the planet's essence. His body might still be human, but his mind, his spirit, they could merge with the consciousness of the flora. He could guide the plants, help them protect themselves from invaders. The planet's energy would flow through him, just as it flowed through the ancient tree. He would become Phloresis's guardian. The thought filled him with a strange sense of peace. It wasn't the future he had envisioned for himself, but it felt right. He had spent years searching for something, though he hadn't known what. Now he understood that this was his purpose. Not to explore distant galaxies or uncover new planets, but to protect this one. Ethan spent the next few days in a state of quiet reflection, preparing for what was to come. He didn't need to send any reports back to his employer, so they had long since stopped expecting regular updates. Instead, he focused on deepening his bond with Phloresis. The planet continued to heal him, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. The burdens of his past slipped away, leaving behind a clarity of purpose he had never felt before. The final night before he knew the ships would arrive, Ethan sat beneath the great tree, its glow bathing him in soft, rhythmic light. He placed his hand on the bark one last time, letting the planet's energy flow through him. In that moment, he felt the full weight of Phloresis's ancient consciousness press against his mind. It was overwhelming, a flood of memories and knowledge that spanned millennia. He saw the history of the planet unfold before him, the rise and fall of civilizations, the countless beings who had come here seeking solace, the delicate balance that had been maintained for eons. And then he felt Ida emerging, his consciousness blending with the planets, his thoughts becoming one with the flora, the trees, the energy that pulsed through the very soil beneath his feet. He wasn't Ethan Moore anymore, not really. He was something more, something greater. He was Phloresis. The next morning, he stood at the edge of the clearing, waiting. He could sense them before they arrived at the ships, the soldiers, the machines of war descending from the sky. The rumble of engines shook the ground, and the air was thick with the scent of exhaust and burning fuel. But Ethan didn't feel fear. He was calm, at peace. He knew what he had to do. The first of the soldiers emerged from the dropships, armed to the teeth, their eyes scanning the jungle with cold precision. They were here to conquer, to strip the planet of its secrets. But they had no idea what they were walking into. As they approached the edge of the clearing, the plants began to react. The soft, glowing flora shifted colors, releasing waves of scent that filled the air. The soldiers hesitated, confused by the sudden change in their environment. One by one, they slowed, their faces softening, their expressions turning from suspicion to curiosity. Ethan stood silently, watching. The plants didn't attack. They didn't need to. They simply a broken bar responded. The soldiers, who had come with violence in their hearts, found themselves disarmed, not by weapons, but by the overwhelming sense of calm that permeated the air. The longer they stayed, the more the tension drained from their bodies. Some of them dropped their weapons, others removed their helmets, their faces slack with wonder. Phoresis was doing its work. Ethan could feel the planet's energy flowing through him, guiding the plants, helping them reach the soldiers on a deep, emotional level. These men, trained for war, hardened by battle, were no match for the peaceful energy that enveloped them. They had come to conquer, but instead, they were being healed. The leader of the group, a grizzled officer with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward, his rifle lowered but still in hand. He looked at Ethan, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "What a broken bar. What is this place?" the officer asked, his voice quiet, almost reverent. Ethan smiled, feeling the planet's energy pulsing through him, guiding his words. "It's a sanctuary, a place of healing." The officer glanced around at his men, who were now sitting on the ground, some of them leaning against the glowing trees, their faces relaxed, at peace. "We came here to secure this planet," the officer said, though there was no conviction in his words. "Our orders." "Your orders don't matter anymore," Ethan said gently. "Phoresis doesn't need securing, it needs protecting." The officer looked at him, and for a moment, Ethan saw the man's inner conflict. He had come here expecting a fight, a mission to complete. But now, standing in the presence of the planet's calming energy, those instincts were being stripped away. The officer's hand loosened on his rifle, and slowly, he let it drop to the ground. Ethan stepped forward, placing a hand on the man's shoulder. "You can stay," he said softly. "You don't have to fight anymore. Phoresis can give you peace, if you let it." The officer's shoulders slumped, and he nodded slowly, as if some great weight had been lifted from him. "A broken bar, I understand," he whispered. One by one, the soldiers followed suit, abandoning their weapons, their mission, as the planet's energy enveloped them. They had come to conquer, but they would leave as protectors, guardians of a world they hadn't understood before now. As the ships departed, empty except for the machines they had brought, Ethan stood in the clearing, watching them disappear into the sky. He was no longer Ethan Moore, the explorer. He was part of something greater now. Phoresis was safe, for now, and he would be here, always, to ensure it stayed that way.